listening to 106.7, Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, castle doctrine and stand your ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Joining us later today will be Mr. Chuck Kitchen, Republican candidate for the North Carolina Court of Appeals, who will discuss why judicial races are more crucial than ever in November and how a new anti-gun super PAC will be trying to get anti-gun judges into office right here in North Carolina. But first, mark your calendars because today is the day hell froze over. You've probably heard about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, often called the Nutty Ninth, whose 29 justices and invariably leftist decisions plague 9 states and 2 Pacific Islands. Every time the Ninth rules on a gun issue, they rule against us, right? Well, not this time. Twice, actually. Something going on in the Ninth? The first pro-gun decision was from the Ninth occurred a couple of weeks ago when in the case of Duncan versus Becerra, filed by the California Rifle and Pistol Association, implementation of the ban on standard capacity magazines, which would make criminals of thousands of gun owners, was blocked by a district court in San Diego. Well, damned if a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit didn't rule in favor of the injunction, blocking the magazine ban from being implemented. Even more astounding, however, was the recent Ninth Circuit decision in Young versus Hawaii, in which the same court which recently ruled that there is no right to carry concealed, that was Peruta versus San Diego, has now decided that there is a right to carry arms openly outside the home. Go figure. In what has been described as an exceptionally well-written decision relying on textual, contextual, and historic measures, as well as heavily citing the historic Heller decision, this decision strikes down Hawaii's complete ban on carrying firearms outside the home. Now, some caveats are in order. In both of these cases, these were panels from the Ninth Circuit, not the full court en banc, which would include all justices. In Duncan versus Becerra, the ruling was only for an injunction blocking immediate implementation of the ban, meaning the supposed merits of the ban itself have yet to be considered by the courts. Nonetheless, the 2 decisions represent breaths of fresh air from the stifling left coast. However, I will say that the Ninth being what it is, don't expect more of the same.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine.
We periodically run a segment we call The End of the World as We Know It, in which we highlight the most ludicrous threats to American culture and civil liberties. In this segment of The End of the World as We Know It, we will examine the left's intent to end free speech. Indeed, in case you needed yet another example of how the Second Amendment is the teeth of the Bill of Rights, protecting all of our other freedoms, just weeks ago, the New York Times once again proved it. You see, in a long piece entitled How Conservatives Weaponized the First Amendment, yes, weaponized, the leftist voice of tolerance laments how conservatives have exercised entirely too much free speech. Citing Supreme Court decisions by the conservative majority and complaints by Obama appointee to the court Elena Kagan, the recent decisions, says the Times, are, quote, the two decisions were the latest in a stunning run of victories for a conservative agenda that has increasingly been built on the foundation of free speech. Oh my God, free speech, perish the thought. Citing a free speech advocate, the article goes on to say, and I quote, the progressive community is at least skeptical and sometimes distraught at the level of First Amendment protection which is being afforded in cases brought by litigants on the right. Citing law professors, the Times posits that earlier claims by liberals to First Amendment protections were naive. That's their word. Going on to observe, and I quote, some liberals now say that free speech disproportionately protects the powerful and the status quo. Even more damning was the admission of Louis Michael Seidman, a law professor at Georgetown University, who said, and I quote, when I was younger, I had more of the standard liberal view of civil liberties. And I've gradually changed my mind about it. What I have come to see is that, and I want you to listen carefully here, it's a mistake to think of free speech as an effective means to accomplish a more just society. I'll say it again. It's a mistake to think of free speech as an effective means to accomplish a more just society. Think about that. But it gets even better. Says the Times, and I quote, to the contrary, free speech reinforces and amplifies injustice. Catherine A. McKinnon, a law professor at the University of Michigan, wrote in Free Speech Century, a collection of essays to be accomplished this year, once a defense of the powerless, the First Amendment over the last 100 years has mainly become a weapon of the powerful, she wrote. Legally, what has, toward the beginning of the 20th century, or what was, a shield for radicals, artists, and activists, socialists and pacifists, the excluded and the dispossessed, has become a sword for authoritarians, racists, misogynists, Nazis, Klansmen, pornographers, and corporations buying elections. Well, there you have it. If you advocate free speech, you are a racist. In truth, the so-called liberals aren't liberal at all. You see, in classical terms, liberalism was defined as a political ideology that values the freedom of individuals, including the freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and markets, as well as limited government. In classical terms, we are the liberals. Our opponents are merely fascist. So from this point forward, I encourage everyone to discard the name liberals and stop calling them liberals and call them what they really are, collectivists. They are collectivists. We are individualists. This is the debate which divides us and which, quite frankly, may ultimately lead to civil war in this country. Are you a collectivist or are you an individualist?
End of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine.
In our next segment, we will take a look at a new anti-gun super PAC that will be playing a role in North Carolina's upcoming judicial elections. After all, you do vote for judges, don't you? Joining us for this segment will be Mr. Chuck Kitchen, Republican candidate for the North Carolina Court of Appeals, who will discuss exactly why judicial races will be so crucial in the November elections. We will also examine what may be the end of gun control, namely the recent settlement in which the Second Amendment Foundation and attorney Alan Gura have secured from the Department of State the right to publish plans on the Internet for guns made with 3D printers. And finally, You keep arguing with your anti-gun acquaintances until you are blue in the face, giving them facts and figures to support your argument, but it never seems to make a difference. The left continues to push for gun control policies that have failed wherever they've been implemented. Why? In our upcoming segment, we will look at what the left really wants. The answer may surprise you. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After a short break, we will give you more of the ammunition you need to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In this segment, we will look at a new anti-gun super PAC that has North Carolina in its sights, potentially getting anti-Second Amendment judges elected to the North Carolina Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, judges that could vex gun owners for years to come. This super PAC, calling itself One Vote at a Time, represents nothing less than Hollywood's attempt to impose California's left-wing values on North Carolina. It was founded by filmmaker Sarah Ullman and funded to the tune of $280,000 by screenwriter Joss Whedon. The guy who told me about this is a pro-Second Amendment candidate for the North Carolina Court of Appeals, namely Chuck Kitchen, who we will have with us today to give you some information on how you can better repel this left-wing assault on mainstream American values in North Carolina. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on, Paul.
Well, we very much appreciate the information that you're giving us. So, first off, why don't you tell the people what you are up to and what your race is all about?
I am the Republican candidate for one of the three Court of Appeal seats. This year, the Supreme Court has one election, which is Barbara Jackson, the incumbent, is being challenged by Democrat Anita Earls, and also she is being challenged by a Democrat who re-registered as a Republican 20 days before filing, and that is the subject of currently a bill in the legislature. The legislature adopted a bill which said if you are not registered as in the political party that you file for, at least 90 days before the filing, they would remove the Democrat or Republican label.
So this bill was vetoed by the governor. Is that right?
That's right. It was vetoed by the governor. It's come back to the legislature. They have a special session tomorrow to vote to override.
Okay. Now, just so people understand, what is the point of a Democrat registering as a Republican in this race? People need to know what they're trying to do here and what the Democrats really have in mind.
Well, the idea is, pretty clearly, this person is really not a Republican. He is a Democrat who's filed as Republican. If you have two Republicans on the ballot and one Democrat, that will have a tendency to dilute the votes. The problem
split
is, of course,
the vote. That's it. To split the Republican vote. All right.
And the real problem we have is that many people who go to the polls will look for Democrat and Republican and not really know who the judges are that are running.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit. Now, that's the Supreme Court, so Barbara Jackson is the true Republican candidate for the North Carolina Supreme Court. Now, tell us about the Court of Appeals runs.
Okay, there's three seats open in the Court of Appeals, or the three elections for seats in the Court of Appeals. There's one seat, Judge Arrowwood, who is a appointee of Governor Cooper, is holding one of those seats. Andrew Heath is running against him, who is the Republican. On the second seat there's an open seat. Jefferson Griffin is the Republican running for that seat. And the third seat is a seat that is currently held by Rick Elmore, who is retiring. That's going to be an open seat. I'm running for that seat. My opponent, Allegra Collins, is the Democrat. She is the one that has been working with this one-vote super PAC.
All right, we're going to talk about that more in just a moment. But once again, tell me who the conservatives. Now, I know, having spoken to you, I know you're pro-gun. I know you're a gun owner. Okay, I know you're a Second Amendment supporter. I realize we're not, because it's a judicial race. We have to be careful about asking specifics, lest you have to recuse yourself should that issue come before your court. But nonetheless, I feel confident that you are the pro-Second Amendment candidate in your race. So tell us again who the conservative candidates are for the Court of Appeals.
Okay, for the Court of Appeals, Andrew Heath, Jefferson Griffin, and myself. All
right, very good. And so why exactly should we care about the Court of Appeals? I mean, why is, obviously, we're concerned about legislators. They make laws. Why should we be concerned about the judicial candidates?
Well, it's important to elect good judicial candidates. And especially, as in myself and the other Republicans, we're all constitutional conservatives. We do not believe that the courts are there to make laws. The concern is, of course, the legislature passes a law, then a lawsuit is filed, it is appealed up through the courts, and at some point the court will say, well, this is unconstitutional, or we're going to find that you really didn't mean what you say. You want someone on the court who does not have a personal policy to try to make the legislature say what you want it to say. That is the whole idea behind having constitutional conservatives, that we look at the Constitution, we read it the way it's written, and we also interpret the legislation passed by the General Assembly the way they intend to be written. Mm-hmm. It is a very high bar to overturn an act of the General Assembly. It takes it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt that is unconstitutional. And as you have seen, especially in some of the federal court cases, many acts that the North Carolina legislature has passed has been overturned recently. I can't say how I would vote on any particular one, but I just bring that to your attention.
Well, we actually, Grassroots North Carolina has been the victim of judicial activism itself, as we changed the law such that it would have, there was absolutely no legal grounds for the state to prohibit concealed carry by lawful permit holders at the state fair. And when our agriculture commissioner refused to change their policy, we went to court and sued them, looking for an injunction for the state fair several years ago. And it was Judge Donald Stevens, okay, I guess that's district court, who said, and this is a near verbatim in his decision, he said, I don't think concealed carry at the state fair is a good idea, and if I can find a way to interpret the law to prohibit it, I will. Does that sound like judicial activism to you?
Well, first of all, Don Stevens is retired now. He was Superior Court judge.
I'm aware. Believe me, I was kind of sorry to see that. I was looking to defeat him, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that judges should not be allowing their personal preferences in any case. The judgment should be based on the law itself as written by the General Assembly.
Not the law as they want it to be. Yeah, understood. All right, so let's talk about one vote at a time. All right. You talked about these candidates are supporting, and we'll want to hear who they're supporting, the anti-gun candidates for the judiciary in North Carolina. But what did you find out about this super PAC?
Well, I had heard out on the campaign trail, someone mentioned it to me, so I did a Google search, and sure enough, it showed up that this one vote at a time is supporting two candidates in North Carolina, Allegra Collins, who's running against me, and Anita Earls, who is running against Barbara Jackson.
Okay.
I find that concerning, especially they have on their website that their goal is to elect as many, quote, pro-gun safety candidates as possible.
Not pro-gun, but pro-gun safety, which is a misnomer because they don't know anything about gun safety.
Right.
These are anti-gun candidates.
Right, and the Vogue article mentioned this is an anti-gun PAC.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Sarah Ullman, screenwriter, is that what I saw? She formed this thing after, I guess, the Parkland shootings, and with the intention of electing anti-gun candidates, and specifically in North Carolina because of our redistricting forced upon us by liberal judicial activists. Fair enough? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a pretty fair statement. That's what it says on the website. It's important to know that judicial candidates, ideally, or not even ideally, really should not be getting involved with partisan politics or partisan issues like this with a super PAC. I mean, that really does defeat the idea that a person is entitled to a fair, impartial judge when they go to court.
Now, we are going to be talking more about this super PAC in upcoming issues, but the bottom line is that Vogue magazine doesn't mention that another filmmaker, Josh Whedon, screenwriter, has invested $280,000 into this political action committee with the intention of making sure that we elect anti-gun candidates. So people need to understand what is at stake here. We have out-of-town or out-of-state Hollywood, California leftist money coming in to impact North Carolina judicial elections. That's a very big deal. Chuck, I'm running out of time. I'm going to have to say goodbye, but thank you very much for bringing us up to speed.
Sure thing. Good talking to you, Paul.
Our pleasure. And you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. We'll be back after a short break, and we will talk about the potential end of gun control, namely 3D printers. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In a moment, we will discuss the latest gun-related issue to have leftist panties in a wad, namely the recent State Department settlement allowing plans for 3D printed guns to be distributed on the Internet. But first, I want to reiterate what our guest revealed in the last segment, namely that a new Hollywood-funded left-wing political action committee, specifically a super PAC named One Vote at a Time, has received hundreds of thousands of dollars expressly for the purpose of electing anti-Second Amendment judges, anti-gun judges, right here in North Carolina. Worse, the Hollywood elites are not just spending big bucks to control your life. They apparently know what they are doing, because in the last Virginia elections, they are credited with changing at least 10 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates from Republican to Democrat control. So, folks, I'm going to ask you to help us do something about that, to help keep California values out of North Carolina. I want you to help our political action committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, elect pro-gun judges and lawmakers in the upcoming election. To do that, I am asking you to go to our website at GRNC, like Grassroots North Carolina, grnc.org. That's grnc.org. And then click on GRNC PVF, as in Political Victory Fund, at the top of the page. That will bring you to a donation page, and I am hoping you will contribute $100, $50, $25, or even $10. Anything you can do will help us elect pro-gun judges. I guarantee you that every dime will go toward electing pro-gun legislators and judges. 3D printers. Are they the end of gun control? To this point, the guns made using 3D printers are, at best, rudimentary. Early models blew up when fired. Even more recent working models are bulky, cumbersome, ungainly, and generally single-shot. Yet the left seems to think they are the new guns of choice for gangbangers everywhere. Enter Defense Distributed, a small company that back during the Obama administration published plans for a pistol named aptly enough the Liberator. Now, you may recall that that was also the name of a single-shot pistol distributed to the French resistance by the Allies in World War II. Published on the Internet, more than 100,000 copies of the plan were downloaded almost immediately. Unsurprisingly, the Obama administration threatened them with arrest, effectively shutting them down. Citing ITAR, that's the International Trafficking in Arms Regulations, by claiming the plans would be downloaded in other countries, it's difficult to describe how ridiculous the argument would be that they're using regulations aimed at barring the sale of weapons of mass destruction against a single-shot plastic guns. Nonetheless, eventually, defense distributor DDI sued with the support from the Second Amendment Foundation in a case brought by famed Second Amendment attorney Alan Gura. At issue were the government's violation of the First Amendment rights of the plaintiffs, who had every right, as free speech, to publish the plans, regardless of the legality of the pistol itself. Well, apparently the State Department under Donald Trump agreed and thought much less of the Obama case, and just 2 weeks ago they settled with the plaintiffs, allowing the guns to go on sale this month. But in the world of leftism, no good deed goes unpunished. So the so-called Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence, which, by the way, was formerly Handgun Control Incorporated, together with Michael Bloomberg's AstroTurf group calling itself Every Town for Gun Safety, and also the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, they all immediately filed suit to block DDI from publishing the plans. Unfortunately for them, perhaps the last honest judge in America, no, just kidding, there are some, Judge Robert Pittman of U.S. District Court in Austin, Texas, determined that the plaintiffs lacked standing to sue and therefore dismissed the action. But the leftists wouldn't stop at that. No, the Jackal PAC closed in on DDI. Just hours before publication, Democrats in the state of Washington, now together with 18 other Democrat states and the District of Columbia, have filed for and received a restraining order on DDI's plan to publish the plans on the Internet. The states that are suing to stop distribution of the 3D plans include Washington, Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, California, Colorado, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia, and, I'm ashamed to say, North Carolina's own anti-gun Attorney General, Josh Stein, who has never met a gun he wouldn't ban. Now, where the Democrat lawsuit will lead is anybody's guess, but meantime, to a certain extent, the joke is on them. Proving once again the difficulty of stifling free speech, especially on the Internet, a site called codeisfreespeech.com, and a host of other sites began distributing the 3D gun plans, providing untold thousands of downloads. Even Amazon Web Services, which pulled down Code is Free Speech's website, has failed to stop distribution because the site was almost immediately up and running on another server. So, do 3D guns actually represent the end of gun control? Well, writing for Fox News, researcher John Arlott of the Crime Prevention Research Center thinks they might. And by the way, I think that's cprc.org. The Crime Prevention Research Center and Dr. Lott do excellent work. But in a piece entitled, "This Marks the End of Gun Control," Lott wrote, and I quote, "Anyone with access to a metal 3D printer can make guns functionally and aesthetically indistinguishable from any gun that can be bought in a store. Such metal printers are available for less than $2,000. How the government will stop people from obtaining these printers isn't exactly obvious. Proposals to require background checks, mandatory serial numbers, and even a registration process for printers are easily defeated. Even if, some, by the way, sound like gun control, even if printers are registered with the government, what is going to stop gangs from stealing them? And the designs for making your own printer have been available on the internet for years. 3D printers make the already extremely difficult job of controlling access to guns practically impossible. The government is not going to be able to ban guns, and limits on the size of bullet magazines will be even more laughable than before. Many parts of a gun can be made on very inexpensive plastic 3D printers or even from simple machine tools. It will be even more difficult to impose background checks, which have proven quite useless anyway. The government has been no more effective at stopping criminals from getting guns than at stopping them from getting drugs. That isn't too surprising, as drug gangs are the source of both illegal drugs and guns. The goal of eliminating guns is a fool's errand. Every place in the world that we have crime data for that has banned all guns or all handguns has seen a subsequent increase in murder rates. Even island nations such as Ireland and Jamaica, with coastlines that are more easily monitored and defended than land borders would be, have faced 5- or 6-fold increases in murder rates after guns were banned. It is understandable that governments want to regulate 3D printing. Yeah, I don't think so, but that's all right. But gutting the First Amendment is too high a cost. This settlement may bring some awareness to the futility of gun control regulations that only disarm the law-abiding. I would add here, by the way, that when I was asked to comment on the settlement which allowed Defense Distributed to publish plans for 3D guns, and I was asked this by a local TV station, I responded that the settlement was a victory for free speech and quite possibly the death knell for the failed policies known as gun control, adding that perhaps now we can stop punishing law-abiding gun owners for the actions of criminals and actually focus on those who commit misdeeds. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return to discuss what the left really wants. The answer may surprise you. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. So, you've argued with your anti-gun acquaintances until you're blue in the face, giving them facts and figures to support your argument, but it never seems to make a difference. The left continues to push for gun control policies that have failed wherever they've been implemented. Why? In this segment, we will look at what the left really wants. I had an enlightening discussion with a coworker last week as he expressed the frustration I so often hear from conservatives. He said, "I don't get it. Why are they trying to ban guns? It won't work. The bad guys will still kill people." I responded, "Well, what does the left really want?" "I don't know," he said. "To stop crime? That's what they say." "No, that's not it." "Well," he said, "I guess maybe they want my guns." I said, "No, that's just a means to an end. Let's try a different topic. They also want completely open borders, including abolishing ICE. Why do they want that?" Well, he said, to bring in illegal aliens to vote Democrat. Well, true. But again, that's just a means to an end. It doesn't explain why they want to abolish ICE, for example. And he said, "Well, then I don't know. What do they want?" I said, the left wants one thing and one thing only: control. If you look at anything the so-called progressive agenda touts, you will find it leads to one thing and one thing only: increased control over you. Let's start with gun control. You can demonstrate to a leftist that gun control won't stop crime until you are blue in the face. Show them stats that background checks won't work because criminals don't buy guns from dealers or gun shows. Demonstrate to them that after banning guns in Britain and Australia, crime actually went up. Prove that since 1950, 98% of mass killings have taken place in areas where guns are supposedly prohibited. But it won't make a bit of difference. Why? Because he isn't interested in reducing crime. He's interested in controlling you. You see, owning guns makes you just a little bit more independent. You aren't dependent on government to protect you, and if, God forbid, the government ever became tyrannical, you have the means to overthrow it. More importantly, it means that Joe Leftist can't make you do the things he wants you to do. He can't make you toe his line or kowtow to the government to protect you. Make no mistake, nothing irks a leftist like your independence. Independence means you are free to do things they don't like. And while you as a conservative might say, well, I don't care what somebody does as long as it doesn't affect me, that isn't how a leftist thinks. To them, what you are doing is reprehensible, and they are incensed that such behavior is even allowed to exist. Their goal will be to ban that behavior, regardless of whether that behavior harms anyone else or not. I defy you to find a topic of controversy between leftists and conservatives which does not rest on control. Take global warming. Groups who pronounce themselves stakeholders in the environment merely want control of your property. Gay rights. Lambda doesn't merely want to come out of the closet or to marry. No, they want control over the education your children receive. Or race. Leftists who call you racist want to control not only how you speak, but how you think. Here we need to remember George Orwell's concept of newspeak, namely that if you can eliminate a word from the vocabulary, you will ultimately eliminate the concept from one's thought. Rest assured that on our present course, somebody, sometime soon, will decide that the word freedom is racist. Now, why do the leftists want open borders? Again, your arguments that we are letting in criminals will fall on deaf ears. They don't care. After New York Governor Andrew Cuomo pardoned illegal aliens that were set for deportation, including some who had assaulted American citizens, Fox News' Tucker Carlson tried to get an advocate for the illegal aliens to admit that the people had assaulted others and were being allowed to stay. But not only could that advocate for the illegals not even name who a particular illegal alien had assaulted, he didn't care. In fact, for trying to put a human face on the cost of illegal immigration in terms of crime, Carlson was accused of dehumanizing illegals. And yes, the illegals will likely vote Democrat too, but that's just a fringe Benny, if you will. You see, a hardcore leftist knows, I want you to listen to this, a hardcore leftist knows that illegal immigration will increase crime and decrease order in society. In fact, he counts on it. You see, chaos makes you just that much more dependent on government to protect you. You see, chaos creates exactly the type of autocratic society the hardcore leftist wants. And of course, in classic Saul Alinsky terms, you cannot replace a government with the utopia you want unless you destroy the existing. As Tim Daughtry, the Greensboro psychologist who wrote an excellent book I recommend, it's called Waking the Sleeping Giant, How Mainstream Americans Can Beat Liberals at Their Own Game, as he correctly expresses it, to leftists, words don't have meanings. The meanings are malleable depending on circumstances and change as necessary in order to bludgeon you into compliance. Believe me, I've seen this in action. During what was billed as the Great Gun Debate on WXII in Winston-Salem, I systematically dismantled the arguments of all the leftists on the opposing panel. Right on cue, one of them looked me in the eye and said, "You're a hater." I blew him out of the water, of course, but think about it. A hater in his eyes is anyone who doesn't agree with him. And no, this isn't some grand conspiracy. I can assure you that your left-leaning neighbor doesn't have chaos in mind for you, at least not consciously. He or she is just parroting what they've been told. You see, collectivists, they really aren't capable of independent thought. They're herd animals, or as my good friend John Farnham of Defense Technologies International puts it, they are grass eaters. You see, the leftists can be broken into two categories: the useful idiots and the manipulators of the useful idiots. While your liberal neighbor might not know that opening borders will mean dead Americans, I can assure you that Senator Chuck Schumer does. Why else do you think Democrats would take the bizarre position of actually defending MS-13? Now, you find this unbelievable, of course. You say it isn't possible that anybody could be so evil as to actually engineer the deaths of others in order to increase his or her control over your life. But that's because you were raised a decent human being, and more importantly, because you are conservative. We have all been taught to see the best in others and to pursue the interests, our interests, with politeness and civility. Unfortunately, that is not who you are dealing with. You see, as Daughtry correctly expresses it, our disadvantage as conservatives is that while liberals want to control others, we simply don't want to be controlled. To that end, whenever we win, be it an election or a city council race, whatever, we all go home, go back to mowing the lawn, watching the football game, whatever, secure in the knowledge that we have elected or appointed other conservatives to defend our way of life. But not the left. When they win, they work to consolidate gains. When they lose, they plot and scheme to win the next battle. When it comes to consolidating control over you, the left never sleeps. That's why, way back in the 1990s, I made a point of emulating the left and its tactics. My library includes not only Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, but also tomes like Organizing for Social Change and The Activist's Handbook. And you know what I discovered? I discovered that the left really hates it when their own tactics are used against them. So hear this very clearly, folks. This is the bottom line. What we are engaged in is nothing less than a death struggle, not only for the future of America and its culture, but for the control over you, your family, your children, and your most private actions and thoughts. Defeating the collectivists means not only acknowledging and fully understanding the threat, it also means using their own underhanded tactics against them. I hear you already. If we do that, we're no better than they are. Well, I say there are certain times in extraordinary circumstances that we must respond with actions we find distasteful that we should actually condemn even as we employ them. This is one of those times. I encourage you to wage the first step in war by going to the GRNC site, grnc.org, and contributing to the GRNC Political Victory Fund to stop the Hollywood liberals from electing anti-gun judges right here in North Carolina. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, and where each Sunday at 5 p.m. as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, at hyattguns.com. Also, check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. See you next Sunday at 5.